Have you seen the headlines? A plant-based burger substitute or plant-based meat substitute diet is healthier for you than the actual meat-based diet. Or at least that's what the headlines claim. But can we believe them? Is it true? I'm Dr. Brett Scher, the medical director at dietdoctor.com. And I recently wrote a post on our website about this study and exactly about this. Does the study actually support the claims? And look, you've heard me probably say this over and over again. The media claims tend to be sensational. They want people to pay attention. They want people to click. But it also can be very misleading. So it's really important to understand what the study was about and what it actually showed before we jump to conclusions. Now, it seems like there's this increased push for plant-based diets because it's better for the environment. Well, not really. And I actually had two recent podcasts, one with Dr. Frank Mitlerner and one with Diana Rogers, who wrote and produced her documentary, Sacred Cow. I highly recommend you listen to those or watch them on YouTube here to learn more about the true environmental impact on meat, because really the narrative we're hearing isn't complete and isn't necessarily based on science. So definitely check those out. Those are important. But because of that assumption, we're seeing more and more of a push for these plant-based alternatives. So there's still a big question, though, if they're better for our health. So what this study does, it was a small study done by Dr. Christopher Gardner out of Stanford. And he took, 36, I think it was, people and randomized them to either get 2 servings per day of animal products for a total of 8 weeks, and then switch to 2 servings per day of the plant-based alternative for 8 weeks, or vice versa, starting with the plant-based alternative and then going to the meat. And the main outcome that they were measuring was TMAO, which is basically a substance produced by the bacteria in our guts, which some studies had said are linked to risk of heart disease and gone so far to say it's a new causative factor in heart disease. But let's talk about that for a second, because when we're measuring outcomes in studies, you can't have a 16-week study and measure who actually gets heart attacks or who lives and dies. It's just too short. So you have to pick surrogate markers to try and get some idea of whether your intervention is beneficial or not. So it's important to pick the right markers. Well, we've written about TMAO before, and actually we'll link to those below as well. TMAO, the jury is still out. I mean, we cannot conclusively say that TMAO is causative of heart disease because the trials in the past showed an association with an increased risk of heart disease when you compared the extremes, though in the lowest quartile and those in the highest quartile. But in between, there wasn't sort of the gradation effect that more TMAO led to more heart disease. It was only at the extremes. And a lot of these studies were observational studies. And the people who had higher TMAO also smoked more. They were also heavier. They're also more likely to have hypertension. We get into the whole confounding variables and healthy user bias type questions with epidemiological studies. So the jury is definitely still out. So in this trial, there was a small increase, or sorry, let me rephrase that. There was a small decrease in TMAO when people went from the animal-based diet to the plant-based diet. But interestingly, there was not an increase when they went from plant to animal. So let me say that again. If they started with the animal products and then switched to the plant products, the TMAO went down. But if they started with plants and then went to the animals, there was no increase in TMAO. So that's sort of an interesting stepwise function that the sequence matters. And part of that may have to do with gut bacteria. But the tests they did for gut bacteria didn't show any difference between the groups. So, I mean, again, it just shows we can't test for everything, right? We don't know what we don't know, so we can't test for everything. But here's the thing. If you read a lot of the headlines, it's plant-based meat alternatives are better for your health. Well, did this study actually show that? No, this study did not show that at all. It showed that there was a one-directional stepwise decrease in TMAO, but was it at the extremes of the quartiles that matched up with correlation with heart disease? And even if it was, do we know that that's causative or has any impact on our health? And we really don't. And that's the problem. It's part of the problem with trying to fit a study to fit your narrative. And I think that's what's happening here. So we have to be a little bit more thoughtful about our interpretation. I mean, it's an interesting finding, that deserves more study and more follow-up, but we don't know yet what this means. So hopefully videos like this and posts like the one we have on our website are going to continue to help remind people, like, don't believe the headlines. If you see a catchy headline that you're not quite sure you believe, check with us. Check back in. Maybe we have a more detailed analysis to help you think about it a little more carefully and really understand more of what the science actually says. Because this is just one more example of how the narrative doesn't necessarily fit the science. All right. So check the links below, though, for those 2 podcasts with Dr. Frank Mitlerner and Diana Rogers, and also the posts we've done before about TMAO. All right. Thanks a lot, everybody. Have a great day.